Good morning and welcome to Dreamforce. We're here to talk about a subject called asset version management and how you can take control of your Einstein Analytics assets. So before we get started, let's put up our forward-looking statement. This may be the first one you've seen today. I'm sure you've seen these before if you've been to Dreamforce. And we're going to show you some things that are not necessarily in the product today. Some of these are definitely forward-looking, and we would ask that you make your purchasing decisions only on products that are currently available. For future products such as betas and pilots and that sort of thing, don't make your decisions based on that. But we'll try to be clear as to what's available and what's not. So who's going to be speaking today? I'm really just doing a quick intro. My name is Skip Sauls. I work on Einstein Analytics as a product manager, and my teams work on things like the developer experience, basically things like SDKs and our templates, all the things you need to do to package and distribute your apps and interact and embed and so forth. And we're also working on a new initiative called the Data Catalog that you'll hear more about in the future. And I've got with me two of the engineers on the team who have actually built all the things we're going to talk about today, and they've got some really cool things to show you. To my right here is Chris Jolly. He's been with Salesforce several years, worked in the past on things like Canvas, and has worked on analytics for several years, building out all kinds of cool things for analytics templates, and now this new asset versioning we're going to hear about. And then also Greg Smith over here, who's still fairly new to Salesforce, but has done some great work on some developer tools that he's going to talk about. I'm not going to spoil the surprise and give you all the details, but they've got some really great things to show you. So we're going to talk about some challenges, basically say what is it you need to do, and try to explain that whole situation. And real quick, by a show of hands, who here has been using Einstein Analytics? Okay, great. So you'll be familiar with some of the challenges we're talking about. Then we'll talk about some of the new features, and then we'll talk about why there's features that are for certain users and features for other users. You'll kind of see the difference in the perspective. And we've got lots of great demos, and we'll talk about some things you can do to get started to use some of these features. And time permitting, we'll have some Q&A. If we run out of time, we'll be around the show for the week. Come and find us, and we'll stick around here after as much as possible, either here or in the hall. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris so he can talk about the first challenge.
All right. Thanks, Skip. Welcome to Dreamforce. So the first challenge is for the typical business intelligence user. When you're developing dashboards, where do you guys develop your dashboards? Do you develop in Sandbox or are you developing them in production? I'll bet a lot of people here develop dashboards in production, right? Because that's where the data is. It's not like your typical Visualforce page, Apex classes, whatever, Lightning components, where you maybe need to develop them in Sandbox and migrate them. And we're going to talk about that use case too, because what all we're trying to do is understand that there's two types of users. There's your business intelligence users that are using Studio and want to get some of these features, and then there's the ISVs and the power users that want to do the whole continuous integration, have a team of developers, want to check their code into GitHub. So we're going to kind of talk about both use cases and some of the solutions that we've got around this. So some of the problems you have with probably developing dashboards or any assets are, last person wins. I could be sitting there working on a dashboard all day, right? And then somebody else checks out or edits that same dashboard. I save it, then they save just a label change, and they've overwritten my changes, and my changes are gone. And asking some people what have they been doing? Well, we go to the Command E editor and we copy that JSON and we put it in spreadsheets, and that doesn't include the conditional formatting. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just crazy. What do you got? But that's what they were working around, and that's what they had to live with. So, and there's no reverting of an older version. I should be able to go back. You know what? Damn, this thing was working, 5 minutes ago, or this thing was working last week. Let me go back to those other versions. And then there's also not the concept of a draft version. I was talking to some of the guys that develop Mark's dashboards. I'm like, when do you develop these? Well, I get up either really early or I do it on weekends. I'm like, this is just crazy, okay? You should be able to work on the next version while people continue to see your public version, your live version. So we're going to talk about some solutions around that. The first solution, and these kind of are built on top of one another, but they're completely kind of different. So they're different kind of features. The first one is dashboard versioning. And And what you'll be able to do, and I'll show you this, but you'll be able to go on the right-hand side and see all the changes that you've made. And you'll be able to preview those changes and go, oh, okay, yeah, it was working there, and I want to make that now the current version. And then the other thing we're going to show you is dashboard publishing, the ability to pin a particular version as live, and that's what everybody else sees. And these publishers, whoever's a publisher, it's not a permission, it's just you're kind of putting yourself in this mode that you'll continue to see the latest and greatest. And I'm going to show you the tools for the dashboard stuff for version history and publishing. But the same API that's powering this is also available for lenses and data flows, okay? And soon to be Einstein Discovery stories. And Greg will kind of show you some command line interfaces for that. We haven't built out the UI for that, but that feature is available. As you are making saves in winter, you will start getting new versions. One thing to note, we didn't go back and save all your other versions. We couldn't. This feature was turned on in winter, so any saves now that you are making we're collecting the history for that. So just to kind of reiterate a little bit I said, for version history, it is GA winter. So it's available today. By default, we store 10 tagged. When you save a dashboard, you'll be able to add a little tag there, a little description, and 10 untagged. So if you just hit save, 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 you won't overwrite the tagged ones. That's an org value and can be upped all the way to 100. So you can get 100 and 100 to a maximum of 200 per asset. So if the 10 doesn't work, we're Salesforce, we have limits. We're starting off with 10 and 10. We'll probably up this, but you have an org value you can mess with. And the idea is you preview the older versions. You click on it, you go, oh, you play with it, do I like it, and then you save that, and it'll create a new version. Now the dashboard publishing feature, which I'm going to demo also, is pilot in winter, okay? You have to get this turned on, okay? It'll be available GA in summer, but it's going to be it's pilot right now. Get the feature enabled, all right? It's based off history, so you're at least saving the histories now, but to get this feature, you got to enable it. It's on by default if you use Scratch orgs and things like that. So let's go into a quick demo. So one thing to note is, like, here's my dashboard, and you'll notice over here the ellipse, and I'll have this new feature here called version history. So I can go in there, and I can see my older versions, things that I've changed, okay? And I can click on any one of these, and I can see what it looked like previously. So here, and like I said, it includes conditional formatting. So here I added conditional formatting to those numbers up there, and you see them change color. And here I move stuff around, and you'll see it flip, okay? The other thing to note is we will auto tag features. For any who creates apps from templates here or creates templates themselves? All right, so if you're packaging any kind of applications, Einstein Analytics applications, you should be really looking into templates. This talk's not about templates, but they provide you a ton of advantages over just standard packaging. You can package the templates. It gives you a full, it orchestrates the installation process, and you can do a custom installation. But my point is, this actual dashboard was created from a template, and what we'll do is we'll auto tag these, and you can see that this was an initial create from that template on this. And if you upgrade, we'll automatically tag those assets too. So there's auto tagging, and then there's tagging yourself. So if I want to just go in here, and the way this works is I go, oh, okay, you know what? That's the one I want it back there. I just save it, and I give it a little description, revert. So this is where you're new on your save dialog. You have a little version history. This is where you add your tag. I save that, and what I'll get is now change 5, and then that's now my new version. So I reverted change 3 is now, you don't go back, you have older versions, and what you can do is make one of those the new one. So now I have a new change, it's change 5, and that was my reverting. All right. So kind of cool feature. One thing to note, make sure you go back, when you go back in time, make sure you play with it. We don't guarantee that the dashboard will necessarily work. It's kind of like if you've used some editors like local version history, If you go back 2 weeks ago and you revert a Java class, it'll give you exactly what you had 2 weeks ago, but it's not necessarily worked. If some of the other classes change their methods or something like that, it might not compile. Kind of the same way with this. If you remove some data sets that this dashboard was reliant on, it might not work, okay? So just make sure before you revert it and then, and you save that it is the one that you want. Now, if you are looking to do something more comprehensive, holistic, Greg's going to talk about version control, where we check it into GitHub and you're checking in an entire template, the entire thing working together, and that's why you should use templates. So more from an ISV packaging standpoint, look at templates, and we're going to talk about how you can check all that into version control. All right, so next feature I want to talk about is publishing. And this is the ability to work on the next version of your dashboard while people continue to see, at the end of the day, it's content, right? But it's live content. And content management systems, you don't just edit the content and live on the web out there, right? You might take a week. You might have people from marketing have to approve it. Finance might have to approve it. You got QA, you got testers. You might have a bunch of different developers involved. So the idea is anybody can become a publisher. And you click on this tab here, and you become a publisher by adding yourself. You add yourself to this publisher's list. And if you're on the publisher list, you just see latest and greatest. That's all this is. It's just a toggle. Do I see latest and greatest, or do I see the version that's marked as live? And what I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm now on this list. And once I'm on this list, I get this little drop-down list box over here. I'm going to make change 5 live, right? So then I get a little pill there that says that's the live version. And then what I can do is I can go in here and I can, for simplicity, I'm just going to, make a little change. I'm still working on a draft here. I'm going to save this. This is my draft. I'm going to go back over here. By the way, this little thing's only available when you're in preview mode. So I come over here, I go back to version history, and you'll see that this one's marked as draft and this one's live. And kind of just to show that, I've got another user over here called Mark Benioff who's logged in this thing. And if I refresh, I don't see the draft there. And just to show you that this works, if I all of a sudden say, oh, you know what? Make that live, or better yet, even clear the live. And if I go back to Mark's screen here, and I refresh, and he sees the draft. So I move the pointer so that he can see the new version that I'm working on. So cool feature. Moving along, I want to talk about some more challenges, and Greg's going to kind of go into this. But if you are, and this is more for now for the power users, so that was more the business users, and I think anybody can take advantage of those features, right? We're all developing dashboards. But this is more for app analytics templates, authors, ISVs, people that aren't as scared of JSON and IDEs and command line interfaces and those things. But if you have been using templates and you've been developing templates, we didn't give you a whole lot of support. There was no CRUD operations in Studio. You had to go out to Workbench and type in some REST APIs to create the templates and things like that. We didn't give you really any editors. You had VI, you was just editing JSON. No error checking. You had to deploy the thing to get your errors, kind of a slow turnaround. Minimal samples and snippets. The sort of truths was really in the org. And who here uses SFDX? Okay, cool. And that's the new Salesforce Go Forward technology to move the source of truth out of the org and into your version control system of choice. So Greg's going to talk about some of those tools. That's just, by the way, templates. If you've used templates, the only way to get your app in there is to use templates so you can create an app from a template. So Greg's going to come up, talk to about some of the solutions around that we've added to VSCode and the command line interface, and some really cool stuff. But again, this is more for the power user. And with that, I'll let Greg take along.
Thanks, Chris. So yeah, like Chris said, we're trying to solve all the use cases for all kinds of development here. And the primary stuff that Salesforce wants you to use is SFDX and VSCode. So those are the same solutions we're going to integrate analytics into. With the SFDX part for analytics, you can see a little blurb here. You can use these same operations that we just did in the UI, but from the command line. You can use this to script things in CI and continuous delivery tools, or other management scripts you might want to work that are going to deal with perhaps automating the publishing of a draft dashboard at a certain time if you have external systems. Additionally, like I said, when you're writing analytics templates, a lot of JSON editing in there. And there's a lot of places to make a lot of errors. To fat finger something, put the wrong value in, maybe didn't catch the docs. And we want to help in that situation as well, so that a lot of errors you don't even catch them until you go to production, until you deploy it and give it a try. And so that's kind of too late sometimes. We want to catch some of that stuff right up front. Better slide right here. Anyway, so in the CLI, there's the base CLI, and like Chris said, with SFDX, you can do all kinds of stuff with creating scratch orgs, manipulating your orgs, dealing with your source files, pulling them and pushing them from the org. And this works with both Scratch, Sandbox, and Dev orgs just fine. You can do a wide variety. We're going to stick to Scratch org here, so we can see the push functionality, but you can also deploy and retrieve metadata through SFDX. And that includes the analytics metadata, as well as any of the other metadata, any of the Apex, any of the objects you have, stuff like that. We've also added into a plugin into SFDX, like I said, to help with the whole history and publishing process as well, so that you can manipulate those from your scripts just like you could any other build process. There's a couple of really cool other talks. I think Nick Chen, is doing one showing integrating SFDX into GitHub Actions for a complete automated pipeline. I'm not sure when that is, but check it out. Probably search for that in the events app. And the other thing, the other tool that we're integrating with, obviously, is Visual Studio Code. So this is Microsoft wrote Visual Studio Code. It's become a very popular, text editor IDE. Salesforce has a large number of extensions to deal with the base level platform stuff with Apex and Lightning and Aura, S-objects, creating scratch orgs, all that the same kind of stuff. We're working on currently some extensions to that. We'll show some of this to help create projects. So you start with a project with SFDX and you hook that up to your org. We'll show that a bit here. Also, to help with the editing of the JSON files that make up a template. In this case, that's our initial functionality. So that way you don't have to, just the things you would expect. You'll see it in a second here, that you'd expect from an editor, from an IDE, code completion, error checking, hover text, things like that. So that's it for the slides. I will jump into what we were looking at before, Visual Studio Code. In there. So I'm going to do Visual Studio Code first and come back to SFDX, because we were just talking about templates and template development, and that's the solution we're trying to, one of the solutions we're trying to solve here. So in this case, we've already got a project, SFDX project, open in Visual Studio Code. If you haven't seen Visual Studio Code, please go check it out. It's free, completely free, works everywhere. You can download extensions from this little block button here. You see we've got Aura and a bunch of stuff. Got some analytics extensions in there. And there's a large amount of documentation to help you, to the base level Visual Studio Code, getting set up with creating projects, hooking it to your org. We already got it hooked up here because we don't have that much time to do the whole shebang. But I've got a project, and it's got a metadata folder, and you can see in there a Wave Templates folder. That's where a template is. In this case, I already had one. Let's say I checked it out of GitHub. In fact, this project actually is checked out of GitHub. You can see that right there. This is a little bit that says this is in Git, and I can do all kinds of source control stuff from there, as well as diffing files and pushing and pulling if you're familiar with Git in there. And you can see I've got two templates. They come in folders underneath Wave Templates. I've got a CSV template, a mortgage calculator. These have been samples that are around there. We'll look at the mortgage calculator first. In here. So first thing I want to do is actually show that up in Studio. And so one thing you can do a lot is this. The command palette is you use that a lot in Visual Studio. It's Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P. And then you can just kind of search. And I want to open up Studio. So I just type Studio, and it gives me an option to open Studio. In this case, it's going to use my org that I'm already hooked to. If you see down at the bottom, the little blue bar, we've already associated this with an org. That's some standard SFDX and VSCode functionality that you just do with any org, not specific to analytics. We'll just kind of jump through that so we don't have to see that there, but it'll pop up Studio as well. Of course, you could use the previous session to do that. To see your template, I just want to show us real quick what it looks like. First, we'll change it, and then see what it looks like afterwards, and see how hopefully fast it is. But you come to create the app, we say we want to create from a template, and we scroll down to the mortgage calculator. Doesn't have a description. You know, the metadata right now doesn't have anything except this. We'll just look at the pages through it. Doesn't have any previews, and we'll look at the one that asks the question. So if you're familiar with templates, these are the variables. And there's three variables we ask for a mortgage calculator: how much you're going to finance, how long, and what interest rate. So that's what it looks like now. If I come back to Visual Studio Code, we'll just hide this for a second. I can come in here. When you have a bigger monitor, it doesn't take up the whole screen. But the main file in a template is template info. So I'll open that up, and it is a JSON file. This is documented. If you're not familiar with templates, like Chris said, strongly recommend doing this if you plan on, distributing or using your app for a while. Even if you're using it internally, templates can help out a lot because you can reuse it. You can ask different questions to get different output. And it's mostly JSON editing. So you see here we got a JSON editor. This is a standard Visual Studio Code editor. However, if you just did this without our extension, that's all you get. A little bit of syntax highlighting, that's about it. Which is not bad. But some of the stuff we've added in here to help you out is hover text. Some of the things you'd expect from, say, a Java editor, an Apex editor. Hover text on various fields. So if you're not sure what template version is, you can hover text it and see right there. It gives a little bit of information. So you don't have to jump back and forth between the docs quite as much. And there, it'd also do some code completion. So I know there's this template type field, but maybe I'm not quite sure. Maybe I want to check out what my other options are to go in here. I don't want to necessarily have to read. The docs are great. I love our docs. But sometimes, as a developer, I don't want to have to jump back and forth. So I can bring up code completion. In this case, that is control space, just like Eclipse, just like everything else. And for the fields that have values that we can determine, we're going to try to show you that. We can even hit this little I right there, get some more information about it. And that works on all kinds of stuff. So in this case, template type, there's only 3 values. They're hard-coded. Those are the 3 possible values. But for some of the more dynamic fields, and we'll just look at UI, like this one right here, it says it's a path to a file. So a typical thing I'd want here is maybe I don't want to type in the whole file path. Maybe I have some structure here. I can do the same thing, and it'll give me some code completion there. So pretty standard stuff if you've been using editors, but new to templates. In there. And kind of the last most important piece, and this is the one that will probably help out the longest in the future, is we're going to add more validation and linting down at the file level before you push. So for example, you can see right here, there's a squiggly line and a couple of things. If I want to see maybe a larger view of that, so I can be like, I think there's a problems view. Sure enough, my command palette says there is. Bring that up. And we can see the same information down here. For this field. In this case, template detail just happens to be a deprecated field. We just threw it in for the sample. And it's also missing the name field. So this would not really probably work as I would expect it. So one of the things we want to do here was if I hover on this, it says there's a quick fix. So maybe I'm not quite sure what to do, but I click it. Oh, that's really tiny, but if you can see that, it says remove icon. So it's an option to just remove it. It's deprecated. You don't even need it. We're going to expand on this for helper stuff, particularly for some of the more complicated things in templates like rules and macros, where it's a little bit harder to get it working right in here. So I can go ahead and remove that real quick. And then the next stuff, I can also get some code completion on the actual other fields that are available in all of the various parts of the JSON. So I don't have to. I can just kind of, this is the Visual Studio Code pattern for text editing, is a lot of code completion. And it works really well. I can throw in template previews, tells me that's an array. I'm not sure what goes in there yet, again, so I do code completion one more time. Oh, it tells me there I can put in an icon, and I hit enter, and I close my console real quick. And it tells, and then it gives me the rest of the JSON kind of pre-filled out. Some of it will have options. In this case, it doesn't. I don't actually want to do that, so I'll just leave it like that. But what I did want to do before was, let's say I wanted to put in a description on that first page in the template picker, and let's say I wanted to modify the page for the variables, for asking for the amount and the years and stuff like that. So first thing is I know there's going to be some kind of description field here, but maybe I don't know the name. So I just maybe type in description, and it says, oh, there's a field called description, which is simple enough, but maybe some of them aren't obvious. And we say right here, you can hover it, template description, blah, blah, little hover text. So I can type in some description, excellent, for the demo. Cool. Then the next thing I know is I know I want to change the pages, and I know that's in the UI definition file. It tells me right there, path to the UI file. So in this case, obviously I see the UI file, but most IDEs also give you that right there. You can kind of see if I hold down Command and hover, it becomes a link. And similarly, it'll give me a preview of the file as well. So I can click on that, and of course it'll open it, just like Eclipse, just like IntelliJ. We're just trying to match what people are already doing. And in here, I see the same thing. I get some hover text and that kind of stuff. If I put in, foo bar, it should give me a warning. It's giving me some errors as I type, and it says, oh, hey, I don't know what foo is. So it's going to kind of, give you that kind of lint as you type, kind of verifying as you type, like you would expect from any other IDE. So here I know I want 2 pages. I'm going to put the finance amount on one page. I'm going to put the rest on another page. So I'll come and do code completion, say new page, and I'll call this amount. In this case, I'm just going to cut and paste over here because I'm just moving this up. All right, excellent. We've also got this hooked up to automatic code formatting. If you're familiar with that, it's a very common pattern in VSCode as well. We've got it hooked up to prettier. So you'll saw like the trailing comma just went away when I saved. That's also pretty standard with the Salesforce projects. Excellent, so I've just added a new page and put that variable on it. But let's say I want to change that variable a little bit. So in this case, I come and I say, oh, there's a variables file. Similarly, I can do a couple of, the command click thing would work, but I can also peek the definition real quick, just get a preview of what's in that file. But I'll just go into it. And I see my financing amount variable right there with some information. Same thing here, if I put in, a bad value, I should get a yellow squiggly saying that's not a good value. So it'll prevent some fat fingering. I'll also get code completion on that as well. But I know, let's just for now say I want to add a max amount to this, a max and a min. I can just start typing, and in this case, let's say there's a min field, and I'll put min as 1, and then max as, I don't know, 1 million. Excellent. And I'll save that. So now I made my changes. So I just made my variable. I shouldn't be able to put in more than 1 million or less than 1. I just added a second page. I need to get that up to my org to try it out real quick. So very similar thing. I'm in a Scratch org. If you're familiar with Scratch orgs, you do push and pull. That's just the pattern. And this is the standard SFDX pattern, not specific to analytics. It integrates with all the other files. You could change some Apex. You could change some Lightning and do it here as well. So I just say push. Oh, this is a Scratch org, right? Yeah. All right. I will do it a different way, because sometimes it thinks it's a dev org. But I can also bring up, just to show it this way, I can bring up the integrated terminal, because we're going to jump into this anyways. So one thing that's handy is you can just jump right to a terminal window inside of Visual Studio Code and start typing stuff. So I can interact both with SFDX and Visual Studio Code at the same time. So sometimes I may want to do stuff command line, in this case, because it didn't quite work right. Sometimes I want to do in Visual Studio Code, either way. So here I'm writing the thing, I can do force org, is it org push? It'll tell me if it's wrong.
Source.
Source, sorry. Right there. And it takes a second. It's calculating the differences between these files. And there we see the 3 files that I changed, template info, UI, JSON, variables.json. It pushed them up. Honestly, if I'd done it through the command palette, it would look exactly the same. It would pop up a little terminal window and run this command here too. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I actually use SFDX a lot. Like I jump between the two. When I'm playing around with stuff, I have a terminal window and this and kind of jump around. So now when I go back to my org, and I'll just go to Chrome, and I come here to my app template, I should see down in here. See the mortgage calculator now is a description. And when I click it and hit continue, no previews because I didn't actually change the previews. I left them empty. I added the empty field, so there's no preview still. But when I come here, the first thing I see is I got a first page that is my page that I just created called amounts. And it has my amounts on it. And if I put in an extra 0 in there, so I think I put in 10 million, whatever. It gives me the error. And if I put in 100 again. So my changes went up just about, as long as it took for that force push to happen, 2 seconds. Same thing, I can keep going on to the next page. There's my other 2 variables. And I can hit finish and be done. In fact, I will. I'll just call it demo. And this should run in a second here. And in the end, you'll see the mortgage calculator. We won't stick around for that because it's just the mortgage calculator. A couple of things I did want to show before we jump into the SFDX part of history is this is using, we are hooked into Git. So one thing you can see here is the files that you changed. These 3 are ones that Chris created earlier. But the 3 that I just changed here, I can click on them, and I can get a nice diffing tool. Now this is file level diffing, different than the history that's up in the org for the dashboards and stuff. But it is, at the Git level. So this is often handy to check back and forth. And the files should diff nicely, especially with prettier hooked up, so that the format remains consistent as you're working on them. And I could, come along here. I won't, but I could push this up into my branch. I'd be like, I like that now. I'm going to push that into GitHub. That's going to be my source of truth for my orgs from now on. And I can do that all from within Visual Studio Code. Let me get out of that real quick. Let me bring up the terminal again. And I'll hide that side window. So that's the Visual Studio Code. So that's the development side. You can, there's other tools in there, I was going to say, with Visual Studio Code. I highly recommend, if you're interested in this, checking out the Apex debugging talk that Luis is going to give. I think he's doing it like 3 times. So Google Apex debugger, or in the events app. That's a real interesting stuff if you do Apex. And I'm pretty sure there's a Lightning component one as well, talk with VS Code that they're going to do. Check that one also. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the SFDX side. So I just developed some stuff. That's what developers do. On the SFDX side for history, that may be more of a CI, like Chris said, a continuous integration, continuous development thing, or an admin tool is typically who would use this kind of stuff. Instead of using Workbench or trying to use Postman to handcraft the right REST call to try to guess this right. So we have a plugin. So if you list the plugins, if you haven't used SFDX, just Google SFDX literally, and there's an easy installer. And it's just a command line tool. And you can see we have our plugin in there. This plugin is available right now. You install it this is in our docs, so you don't have to copy it down, but SFDX install that name at Salesforce Analytics. So just Google that. It's right in our analytics doc page. But with this, we saw the source push before. Now we're going to have a space in here called analytics. So if you just do SFDX analytics, we'll give you a giant ASCII art, because that's always fun. And then some links down at the bottom. We'll tell you the version as well. We're going to add links here as we release new things. So this is something to check out once in a while if you're an SFDX person. Like I said, the VS Code stuff isn't yet available, but this will be a place where we will put a link there. So if you don't see it in an announcement somewhere, you might see it in this. So like Chris was saying before, he was messing around with dashboards. And so I know I can do that, so I just did SFDX Analytics Dashboard. Now it tells me the other commands I can do here, and the first one I'll do is list. So I need to see what my dashboards are. And I'll just show you this right now. So you can kind of see we just made, well, there's my mortgage calculator that I just created out of my template. And then there's the other dashboards we were showing you. But we already saw the dashboard stuff in the UI. So let's look at something that is not in the UI. Let's look at the data flows. Well, data flows are in the UI, but very similarly, sorry, it's data flow. There is there is a command line, a bash command line plugin to do command line completion on SFDX. You should get it, it's helpful. But you can see we have a couple commands here, so I'm gonna list my data flows. And we see we got 2 data flows, which Chris created. We could go look at them in the UI, but I will not. When you're dealing with SFDX, you're dealing with IDs, just so you know, so it's a little more you know, you have to cut and paste IDs. I'm going to cut and paste that Dreamforce demo data flow ID right there because I'm going to use that to list the history. This command takes a couple of options. You can always add -- help to anything, as well as all of our documentation has all of these commands covered as well as you can, you know, like I said, read it right here. So this takes two things, or it takes one thing. It takes an ID, which is typically -I. I will put that in there. That is the dashboard that or the data flow we're just looking at. And we can see four history items, very similarly to what we saw in the UI for dashboards. Same model here. So with this, I can do the exact same thing. There is a revert command, and you give it the old history ID. So I'll go back to, I'll go all the way back to that initial create. So I cut and paste the history ID out of that, and I believe that is -H. Put that in there. So this is going to say, hey, I want to revert this dashboard back to that history ID, the very first one. And I didn't put in a label in this case, so I did it. I'm going to go back and look at the history again. So I'm going to just change the history. I'm going to go back and look at it, and we see there's a fifth one right there. If I put in a label, it would have shown up there. So you can't really see this in the UI, but the UI would now show that initial data flow if I go and look at it. We'll save a couple minutes for time there. So we have the same thing for publishing. I'm not going to jump into it here, but you can add the publisher, and you can also set the live and draft as well. If you know, again, turn on the pilot feature.
Only for dashboards.
Only for dashboards on publishing, yeah. History on lenses, data flows, and dashboards. All right. Yeah, so that was, so Chris will wrap it up here in a second.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So here's just some links to help you get started. You know, API, you know, documentation on the history and the publishing. Like I say, all our APIs are fully documented. You know, if somebody wants an older version of the data flow and there's not the UI, go here, be a hero, revert them back to a previous version of the data flow. You know, links to the CLI, and like I said, the VSCode plugin is TPD. But as Greg showed you, just type in SFDX Analytics. Am I not on the?
No,
oh, okay. Well, sorry. Just type in SFDX in the you know, in VS Code, and it'll give you some updates there. Quick summary: what we cover. You know, we covered the two use cases for traditional BI users: how to go back and revert different versions, how to publish, how to work on the next iteration of the draft. And it can be a team of you. It doesn't just have to be one. Add a bunch of people to that publishing list, and those are the people that will see the latest and greatest. Everybody else will see the live version. This works for mobile, embedded, whatever. So it just dictates who sees what particular version. Greg showed you the you know, the CLI and the VS Code plugins, and lots of links to get started. So with that, we've got 1:37 for questions. So.
Or you can meet us in the hallway afterwards.
Yeah, go ahead.
We did also translate the map, and you said about that home versioning as well. So they've got a version, it says that they've created a template. They do an upgrade. Does it say the difference between upgrade to latest version? The idea that that new version that they've upgraded to would be the published version as well?
So if you don't, the way publishing works is if you pin a version live, that's the one that everybody's going to see. And it's only for that asset. It's not across all assets in the template, right? So if you had one live and you upgraded, right, to the new version of the template, you'd see a new copy in there. It'd be auto-tagged. It would say CSV, you know, template upgraded this version. But the previous one would still be pinned as live. So that's what everybody be seeing. And so what you could potentially do is, hey, upgrade with this template. I can go around, you know, pin all the versions in there, upgrade, let me go in there and check and go, oh my God, I don't want this damn thing, and let me revert, and nobody should have seen the difference in the meantime. So. Sorry? Reconfigure, same thing. You will get an auto tag, yeah. A reconfigure is essentially an upgrade, but just the same version. Yeah. Yep. Question? So for dashboards and leses, every time you save, you'll get a new version. Now, like I said, there's tagged versions and untagged. So if you want yours to stick around, add a little description, a tag there. Because if I just, let's just say I have like a Chrome script that saves every 5 seconds, that'll just overwrite the ones without the tags. So think of it as kind of almost 2 different buckets. Okay? Yeah.
Solve the problem of 2 developers working on the same dashboard. Is there any plan to like do some sort of branching? Because right now I'm assuming if both of us save at the same time, it's going to create 2 versions.
It would. You would get 2 different versions. Now, we're not really necessarily talking about branching. Now, what we don't want to do is reinvent like GitHub inside Salesforce. But what we do want to recognize, hey, I do need some of those tools, and I don't want to go into that environment. What we do want to maybe do, and I'd love to talk to you, is more what would solve that need is maybe go, you know what, let me do a diff on these and merge them. And that might help, you know, hopefully. Or be able to potentially even just lock one. So your buddy, you know, you're not like, oh, he's got this locked. Maybe I'll wait for him to get done or something like that at least. So kind of just some simple stuff. Yep.
Yeah, the last one would be super helpful.
What, the lock? Yeah.
Most of the time it's just we don't know we're working on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there a similar versioning for recipes?
So templates don't currently support recipes. Recipe 3.0 is coming, and we're going to support that when it comes. I don't know when that's ultimately going to be GA. They're working on it like right now. But no, it does not. But we plan on. It's on our list. That and XMD for data sets. We've had that request too. But right now it's dashboards, lenses, data flows. I believe they finished
Stories.
Einstein Discovery Stories, and then we're looking at XMD for data sets and Recipe 3.0. Question? So you have template 1.0, you create an app from that. You upgrade the template, right? Now you have template 2.0. Now that app stays the same and you have an option. They'll get a little indicator saying, hey, there's a new version of this template. They can either upgrade that, create a second app, whichever one you want, right? So you kind of have that choice. Yeah. Well, you can create many. One of the things templates buys you over just app packaging. You can create many apps from that template, and you get different answers to the questions, whatever you want. But I can create 20 apps from one template, and so maybe I might want to, hey, template version 2.0 came out. Let me just create a new app and to maybe play around with it before. Maybe I upgrade that one. You just have that option.
So how do you know where you get the indication to upgrade?
So when in the dashboard itself, I believe, or in the app, you go to the app like the app page. You just click on the app. It'll say right up top. It'll say, hey, a new version of this available. It's like a little banner. Yeah. All right, we need to wrap up. We'll be outside or something if any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.